It's the Kyle Heimann Show on Redeemer Radio.
There's this image of like, we all have this like perfect mirror that we see ourselves in, but at some point like that has to crack. When Jesus said, "You can do nothing without me," he wasn't kidding. Like I literally can't. So I think in all of our journeys, like we have to come to that moment of like, and over again, probably, that those words are true for me.
It's time for Morning Jolt with Sister Ignatia Henneberry from the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration.
Wake up!
So, Sister, you played basketball in high school and college?
Yeah,
too?
In college, yep.
So, I feel like you don't get to that level without a lot of work.
Yeah.
And a desire to continue to get better at the sport. Like, you've got to shoot your free throws. You've got to practice your dribbling to play on a collegiate level. Like, it's not something you just like, it's something I do in my spare time. Like a club sport or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that takes dedication. Would you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Ooh, you were building up to that one. I don't think so. I think I was, or like I think I've grown to the point of maybe I can fall into that, or like, but I notice more quickly like when that kind of thinking is like creeping in. I think actually my perfectionism hindered me in basketball because I can get lost in my thoughts and what should have been in that last play. And then maybe I react in anger during this play, and then that's not good, you know? So I think that kept me from being free when I was playing. Like, so.
Well, and I think that's the maybe deceptive thing about the idea of perfectionism is you think that somebody who's a perfectionist is going to be the top of their game, like the CEO, whatever, like the person that starts up a new business and is super successful because they're perfectionists. Everything's done to the best of its ability, but it can also be crippling.
Yes.
So you almost want, I wonder what the like the perfect percentage of an 80% perfectionist or a 90% perfectionist is what you really want. Yeah. Because things aren't going to be perfect. And so you have to be expecting failure and be able to kind of roll with it and to adjust things.
Be okay with it.
And say like, okay, that didn't go exactly as planned. Let's do things a little bit differently for the next time, and to not get hung up on that.
Right. Yeah. That is
or
like
beat yourself up for
like
it.
A judgment on who I am as a person in my depths. Like, no. Yeah.
So I guess in the spiritual life, sometimes, I don't know if this is the exact same thing or if it's a little bit different, like scrupulosity.
I think they go, hand in hand. I think maybe it might start with one, lead into the other, but I think where one is the other one's there.
Is scrupulosity just a religious perfectionism? Or is it different?
I think there can be a natural side to it, but I think when we refer to it, I would call it it's like, if I'm not perfect, then I am outside of God's grace. So I think like the scrupulous person then takes the perfectionism to like, okay, I'm outside of grace. He can never love me. Like, this is because I've done this thing. Like, to someone who's maybe in health would say like, that's not really that big of a deal. But to this person, it's like, I have lost all hope. Like,
is that a more general thing, or do you think? Because what makes me think of is somebody who has maybe not followed the church's teaching on chastity, and now they feel like they're dirty, used, with like different analogies that they use, like the damaged gift or whatever. And so maybe that'd be a specific thing that they kind of lock onto, or maybe they believe falsely of the church's teachings of forgiveness and reconciliation and things like that.
Yeah, I would call that something different. Maybe even like maybe like a despairing, maybe not necessarily scrupulous, because I think like scrupulosity is like, you have like your actions under a microscope. So like when you've actually done something that is maybe like a mortal sin that like at the time you didn't realize, or even you did realize or whatever, but then like been forgiven. I think, maybe then comes in like not believing in forgiveness. I think that can kind of go along with scrupulosity.
I feel like more common is the opposite of like, I'm a good person. Like, I don't need to go to confession. I haven't done anything. I haven't killed anybody.
Yep.
Like that being our threshold of,
I know.
of holiness.
Good for you.
I didn't murder. And so I think kind of a lack of
Yeah.
self
Yeah.
recognition or self-awareness.
Yeah, the healthy balance.
Tends to be what a lot of us fall into.
Yeah.
And so I guess, how common do you think it is for people to be scrupulous? And maybe does it not always present itself as we would expect? Like, does it maybe seem like somebody doesn't care because they feel like there's nothing they can do? Or like,
yeah, I think it's more common than we think, because I think it shows itself. It's not always just the irrational, I'm putting moral value on everything. Like, I think there's cases of people that are like that, but also I think it shows itself in like this, in self-reliance, any level of control that's beyond what we really should have, or, control that we're keeping from God and we're appropriating to ourselves. So yeah, maybe the person that's, acting in self-reliance, that like, they would never say like, I don't need God, but they're practically acting as if they don't. So I think that is a form of perfectionism. Yeah, different from the person who's like, crippled by seemingly innocuous decisions. So I think more people have perfectionism. At the root of perfectionism is like, I can build my own, I can win, God's good grace, or if I do something, then I'll be outside of God's good grace, when that has nothing to do with it.
In a way, it kind of seems like two extremes, and maybe we're supposed to fall in the middle. Like, I can be holy enough to earn it. Well, no, you can't. But also, if you're not holy enough, you don't lose it.
Yeah. I like that spectrum.
So
that's nice.
we need to realize we're not good enough.
Right.
But with God's grace, we can be healed. We can be forgiven. We can move past that. It kind of makes me think of the line we say at every Mass, the Lord, I'm not worthy.
Right.
Like, it's recognizing I'm not worthy, but only say the word.
Yeah.
And I shall be healed. Like,
yeah.
We're not worthy, yes, but with God's grace, by God's grace, there go I. What is that? That sounds like a thing.
Yeah, but for God's grace, there go I. Yeah. That's like, you look at everybody, all the other pathetic people out in the world, and you're like, But then you remember, like, oh yeah, like, I'm also pathetic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're only what God's grace does in us. Yeah, so I think, the spectrum is a nice image, I think, because, we should be in the middle. Because at one time, there's this image of, like, we all have this, like, perfect mirror that we see ourselves in, that, like, I can earn it, I'm doing great, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, like, that has to crack. Like, we have to, realize, like, no, when Jesus said, you can do nothing without me, he wasn't kidding. Like, I literally can't. So I think in all of our journeys, like, we have to come to that moment of, like, and over again, probably, that those words are true for me. And we realize that, but not so much that we feel damned to hell, but the fact that, like, those words are true for me, but you still want to be with me. I think words like that are powerful. Like what you just said, the prayer before communion, like, I'm not worthy, but say the word and my soul will be healed. And he's not just like, okay, fine. No, he wants to. He wants to be with us. He likes being with us. So I think the person in the middle, is that person that realizes, they're nothingness before God. Like, they can sit with that, but at the same time realize, like, but he loves me anyway, and he wants to love me. And that's freedom. Like, that's,
How much of that is shame?
How much
does shame play into us feeling like what we've done?
Yeah.
We can't be forgiven for that, or
I think that's
like,
big.
And how much does that keep us away from going to confession because we're ashamed to say our sins? There's
a good distinction. So, like, disclaimer, I have not actually read Brene Brown.
Okay.
And I don't agree with everything that she stands for or says, but things that she has on this are very good. So there's a difference between shame and guilt. So guilt is realizing an action that I've done is wrong and acknowledging that. But shame is like, because of an action I've done, I myself am bad. And then starts all those lies. It's like, I can't be forgiven. I shouldn't be forgiven. Why would he want to forgive me? I've done this bad thing. Like, I'm not redeemable. Like, where all those lies come in, that's I think that's the effect of shame. There's also an interesting point of like shame actually points at like our desire to be in communion, and like we almost like despair of that communion. Like I can't be in communion. I want to, but shame is an interesting dynamic, and really like some people like they don't realize that they're living in it until they realize like, oh, I'm actually like living out of shame, and like that's how I'm acting. Yeah.
Do you think scrupulosity is something that you could self-identify, or do you think you need somebody to help you work through that or point it out?
Yes and no. I think people can realize that, like, have scrupulous thoughts, but I think they need the eyes and the voice of another, but in a certain way. So like the scrupulous person can't be told that like you're being a little scrupulous. That's not really true. Like, you know, this decision that you thought was awful, or this thing that you said that you thought was awful actually isn't. Like, it's not that bad. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not gonna register. Like, they'll believe you and say, like, it will provide some relief of like, okay, thanks. Like, but it's not gonna heal. So I think they need to be affirmed. So like that shame is still there of like, I'm a bad person. But if you're able to be a person to like look at them and say like, no, like you're loved. You've just told me all of these thoughts that you have, you know, that don't make sense, or like you feel bad about or whatever, but I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I still like being around you. And then in that space, hopefully a person can like start to believe that.
Yeah. So I guess besides just being that gentle friend or whatever, mm-hmm. if somebody is struggling with this, should you go to a confessor, a spiritual director, a therapist? Would something
all
like that
the above
help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it depends on the person, but yeah, a combination. I think having a regular confessor is helpful, because I'm sure it'd be interesting to talk to a priest about this. Like, I'm sure it's difficult for them to like, I'm sure they have like flags go off of like someone saying something, but they're like, there's more to this story, you know? So like, well, is that really, or is there more going on? Or yeah. So I think it would be, or somebody confessing scrupulosity all the time might not be helpful. Like, you know, cause it's, yeah, where's the will in all of that? How culpable really are they? You know, they need healing is what they need. So yeah, how can that healing happen?
It's kind of like confessing being anxious or being depressed, when these sound like it might be clinical or other factors. It might not be a sin that you're depressed. Right. It might be that you need some medicine, or you need some therapy, you need some counseling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and counseling can be helpful in that, because scrupulosity has roots somewhere, you know, in your life. So like, let's uproot those and find some healing, you know?
Well, I think that was helpful. And I mean, I probably tend on the side of thinking, I'm a good person. I don't do anything wrong. But there are, I think, some different things in my life where I can see that I fall into that. I wouldn't have thought it was scrupulosity, but now the way that you describe it, of this kind of like feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough because now I did this. Like I let my family down or whatever, like these different things that I'm not good enough. But to see that as, no, I can find healing and forgiveness and start over new, and tomorrow's a new day or whatever. Yeah. Like go to confession and not to let those things keep me away from God's grace and forgiveness. Yeah. I think it's helpful. Yeah. And for somebody that's really struggling with that, to definitely reach out and find some help for that as well too. Yeah. Yeah. Like people do love you. Like, you kind of think, well, they just don't want to, are around me because they're nice or something. Like, no, like people might just love you. Like it's possible. It's quite possible. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Sister Ignatia. Hey, it's been fun. Thank you. If you have any suggestions, comments, or words of affirmation, shoot us an email, show@kyleheimann.com. And until next time, remember to leave room for the Holy Spirit.